Hello, welcome to Marrakesh. Welcome to the Policy Center for the New South Atlantic Dialogue, yearly a wonderful meeting of interesting people. And today we have Rebecca Bill Chavez as a guest, and I tell her welcome to our organization. Mrs. Bill Chavez, we are living in troubled times in many, many different ways, and one of the most tragic ones is migration.
Yes.
We have migration in Southeast Asia, we have migration in Africa, going from Northern Africa to Europe. But then we have one area which people don't know that much, and that's the Mexico-United States border, the problems you have in Venezuela, the problems you have in Guatemala and in San Salvador and so on. Why can't the Americans get the border under control? I saw that there are 8,000 people a day practically arriving. How is that possible?
Unfortunately, migration has become, it's a domestic politics issue. And so instead of the long-term, the only way to address migration is through comprehensive immigration reform and through addressing the root causes of migration. People leave their homes not because they want to, but because they have to. They have no hope. So in particular, the countries of Northern Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, many of the migrants come from that part. They make the very dangerous journey through Mexico to the Mexico-U.S. border. But as you see in the news cycle right now in this election year, instead of talking about what we need to be talking about, it's all about getting votes. So I'm not super optimistic in the short run. We have devoted some money and but not near enough resources and time and effort to addressing the root causes in Northern Central America. So the issue of citizen insecurity,
Meaning what, citizen insecurity?
Citizen insecurity is just everyday violence.
Probably San Salvador.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Gangs, more and more drug trafficking organizations, gender-based violence is becoming a huge issue. So you have that to address. You have the economic challenges, poverty, inequality, and then you have serious governance issues, like high levels of government corruption. So in addition to getting Congress to actually act, which I don't see right now, our Congress is so divided, coupled with the root causes strategy, I'm not optimistic about a near-term solution.
So, but in the United States, it seems to me that the question of the border of the United States, it's not a question of asylum. It's more a question of people looking for a better life. Not asylum because there's torture in Venezuela or torture in South America in general, but they're going because they're poor and they look for a better life. So that's one point. The second point is, why can't the border be secured? I'm asking ignorant. Trump tried the wall and he did 700 meters and that was about it.
Yeah.
But everything has been tried and there are a lot of border patrols. So why do they still make it across?
Well, first of all, I think that there are some valid asylum cases. I mean, we have 3 full-blown dictatorships in the hemisphere: Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. So I do think that there are cases of...
Okay, there may be cases.
And the other is more and more, when we talk to people at the border, they're talking about climate-driven migration, especially the Caribbean and also Guatemala.
Without being cynical, it's too hot for them, or not enough water, or what?
In the Caribbean, it's an existential threat. In Central America, it's unpredictability of weather. There's a part of Northern Central America, it's called the dry corridor, where this is subsistence agriculture. So people aren't able to feed their families. And then there are also extreme weather events, increasingly, that are driving people north. So there is this combination of really difficult factors. But you ask him a great question about securing the border. So I think that we talk a lot about, right now, this reviving a version of Title 42, which is where we could turn people back to Mexico immediately without allowing them to
Without
even
an
try.
asylum application and writing, just throwing them back.
Exactly. But the securing the border, it's a 2,000 mile long border.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever be able to have a sealed border. I mean, I think the wall is
And you need workers anyway.
right. And this is part of it too, is that's part, we need to be doing, educating the US population about the importance of migrants to the US economy. We don't want a wall for that reason. Excellent point.
Probably the ranchers we talked about in Texas, they need workers to work
Yeah.
the farms or the ranches or whatever. And if they don't come, Mexican workers in California do all the work.
Yeah.
The Californians don't do the work. But still, the question is, I saw the figure that 2 million Americans, 2 million migrants practically this year had contact with border guards, were arrested or were expulsed or whatever. 2 million is an enormous figure, even with 2,000 miles.
Yeah. No, I mean, the numbers are staggering. The numbers are staggering. There are some efforts, some small efforts, and it's not going to solve the problem, but USAID, for example, is working on a temporary workers permit where you can legally enter the United States and then return home. And so there's an increasing number of those, but we have to think about other legal pathways because people are going to continue to try to come to the United States. So there are tools like that. The other thing, though, I just want to highlight is this is not just a U.S. border issue.
No.
It's a hemisphere-wide crisis.
No, it's not even that. It's a global problem.
It's a global, as you pointed out.
It's a global problem. If you look at North Africa, how many people are trying to leave from Libya, from Morocco, from Egypt, from wherever, trying by boat to get across to Italy or to Greece or to Turkey, whatever, and they're unable to stop it. I mean, it's not a question, the discussion is not slamming the United States for their inability to stop migrant flows, because the migrant flows from Europe, from Africa are not stopped either, and from Asia are not stopped either, unless you bombard boats and unless you mine the borders, and even then, it would
Even
not
then.
have a, yes.
Exactly. There are, I mean, what you're describing is, and we all see these scenes, these tragic scenes of, and I think one that's getting more and more attention is, I mean, there's over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the Maduro regime. Colombia has been very opening. I think people are now there's growing anti-migrant sentiment. But we're seeing, as a result, more and more Venezuelans, but also Haitians. And Cubans that are now transversing. That's called the Darien Gap, the Darien Jungle, between Colombia and Panama.
And I tell you, some Russians are flying from Russia to Mexico and then go across the American border.
Yep.
That's another one. Or through Canada is another one.
Yes, and you were hearing about people flying to Brazil as well, from the Middle East, from all over, and then making the journey. And then there's this second migration that's happening where people who have been displaced, for example, Venezuelans who have gone to Chile, are finding that the growing xenophobia there is making life impossible. So they've been displaced a second time and then trying to come into the United States.
But doesn't this migration problem play into the hands of Trump? Because the people are getting more anti-immigration, are getting fed up with migrants. And they say, Trump has promised us the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And he will continue the wall and nobody comes anymore.
Yeah, and I think the Democrats are extremely worried.
Yeah, but they have the power. At least they have the power in the Senate, they have the power in the White House, and they have problems with the House of Representatives. So they're in power now 3 years, almost 4 eventually. Why didn't they pass anything which is, a solution, or almost a solution?
So comprehensive immigration reform, there have been attempts in the past. In fact, you had bipartisan agreement. So, for example, Senator McCain at one point was part of one of the early pushes for comprehensive immigration reform. There's not enough support in Congress.
And the American people, it's interesting, America is a country of migrants.
Yeah.
From the beginning, migrants. And they are now, even the Cuban migrants who are in the United States, are opposing the arrival of other Cubans.
Yeah. I don't know what that says about human nature.
I can tell you.
Well, I can probably, I don't want to say, maybe. So it's what you're talking about is a reality. And right now we're seeing it play out in a very dramatic way because the Republicans now are saying we're not going to give you funding for Ukraine
unless you give us money for the border.
Yeah.
So would you give it?
Would I give it?
I would give it.
Oh boy, that's a tough question.
Yeah, that's a very nice, ideal suggestion. But you told about the reality of humanity. It is a very bitter and hard situation. And in the United States, if you see, as you have seen, the flows of immigration coming across, people being arrested. At Trump, they were separated from their children. And they didn't even find all the children. They separated it.
I know.
So what, final question, what do you propose? If Biden calls you or Obama calls you and says you have to help Biden?
I think this is really tough because it's an election year. And so I'm going to take off my think tank head. I am not...
Take off your liberal
I did work for Obama.
Ideal.
So I think in this election year, and I'm not speaking for the Inter-American Dialogue here, I'm speaking for someone who is an academic and who served in government. I think that given what's at stake with these elections that are coming up, I think we're going to have, some of these choices are going to have to be ugly. So as far as this particular case, I would, this is me, you're going to say I'm hedging, but I would not give up on pushing Congress on Ukraine before I give on the treatment of migrants. I've spent time at the border. I've seen it. But I do think that if Biden does get a second term, I very much hope he devotes more attention to the region, to Central America, and to working with Congress to passing a comprehensive immigration reform. I have to say that I think the Biden administration has done some wonderful things in Central America, but not enough. And it has not done enough for the rest of the region.
So we have to wait another year at least until there is a reform. But as it is, the Republicans are not willing to do anything. The Democrats can't do anything.
No, I don't think comprehensive immigration reform is going to come in the next year.
So there'll be more masses flowing across.
I think there will be more masses flowing across. And like you said, it's not, the situation is so dire in these countries. It's so dire. And surveys show that the intent to migrate remains very high in countries like Nicaragua.
Well, that's like countries in Mali. It's countries like in Myanmar.
Yeah.
It's like countries in Vietnam even, which is not doing that bad.
So one thing, if I want to end on a more positive note.
Okay, because we're close to Christmas.
So we're close to Christmas. Is that we are seeing, I mentioned this earlier today, we are seeing cities learning from one another about how to integrate migrants into their community. I'm thinking about, for example, there's a city in northern Costa Rica, Upala, Costa Rica, where the mayor is working hard with the business sector and civil society to create work. And we're seeing a network of mayors. So the mayor of Bogota, the mayor of Barranquilla, Colombia, the mayor of Upala, Mayor Garcetti, when he was in mayor of Los Angeles, for example. We're seeing at the local level real work being done on this front.
Are they supported by Washington?
Not as much as they should be. Not as much as, and you see that Chicago in particular is constantly knocking on Washington's door, asking for more federal assistance in this area. And it's not enough. The federal government's not doing enough.
Thank you very much. It was nice talking to you.
It was nice talking to you too.
Very nice. Thank you very much.